Hi there. So I want to ask the question, how is involuntary psychiatry similar to historical slavery or chattel slavery, treating other humans as property? So how is involuntary psychiatry, non-consensual psychiatry, similar? And that would include many manifestations of civil commitment, psychiatric holds, and the insanity defense? Well, I'll tell you. And what inspired me, I'll tell you actually, the works of Thomas Szasz. It inspired me to think this way. And to pose questions such as this, because I think he first posed questions similar to this himself. And he wrote a book called Psychiatric Slavery, and he explains the analogy, the metaphor in depth. So this is sort of my understanding, my take on the subject of, why non-consensual psychiatry is similar to historical slavery. So, let's look at civil commitment in psychiatric holds. In the case of an adult who is subject to civil commitment or psychiatric hold, they are forced to be within the confines of a psychiatric unit in a hospital or a psychiatric hospital. They're literally stuck there under lock and key, in a locked psychiatric ward where they are forced to stay within the confines of the physical premises of a psychiatric unit or hospital. So how is that similar to chattel slavery or historical slavery? Well, I'll tell you. So the people who are treating someone who does not want to be in a psychiatric ward, they're likely earning money from doing so, whether it's a psychiatrist, a social worker, a counselor, a nurse practitioner, a psychiatric nurse, so on and so forth, an orderly. They're likely earning money from, providing unwanted care to a person who is forcibly locked inside a psychiatric unit or hospital. So a person who is, danger to themselves or others, and if they're a danger to others, they're likely breaking a law, so they should be dealt with in the criminal justice system. And if they've not broken a law, of course they should be, allowed to, be free. They should be able to enjoy the right to be left alone if they want to be, if they're not hurting others and not violating any laws. And of course, let me preface this with that, I think suicide is tragic, and I think it would be great if suicides just stopped happening altogether. I would like that. I would like there to be 0 suicides each year. I would like to see all humans experience happiness. However, for those who cannot be convinced through persuasion and kindness, suicide should be respected as a civil right, as a human right, as long as it's being done in private. Just like sexual relations, you can't do it in public, but you can do it in private. Suicide, similar thing, but suicide is probably often, not morally desirable, but it doesn't mean that it's all right to forcibly stop an adult from engaging in suicide by locking them up. And, someone might say that an adult who is attempted to engage in suicide or is planning to engage in suicide, isn't aware of their own condition. They have, I think it's called anagnosia, where I may be mispronouncing that, but basically it's saying, well, they don't realize that they're having this mental disorder, so therefore if we can simply cure them and make them realize it, or treat it, well, they'll feel good and not want to engage in suicide. And my response to that is I think it's dehumanizing. How long should we treat somebody against their will before it's almost more like torture? How long should we imprison somebody before it's violating their human rights? Effectively imprison someone. So again, back to the topic of what I'm saying here is, how is, involuntary psychiatry similar to chattel slavery and historical slavery? Well, again, I think the person, an adult, who is being forcibly locked inside a psychiatric ward, they're not truly benefiting. I think, there's a whole psychiatric survivors movement for people who feel they've been traumatized and abused and tortured by the psychiatric systems that exist in hospital wards and psychiatric wards. There's a whole psychiatric survivors movement, and I think that shows that there's many people who don't feel they've benefited from being forcibly treated. And additionally, there's in the United States, there's between 30 and 40,000 people who've engaged in suicide. And that says to me, there's been 30 or 40,000 people who've wanted to engage in suicides. And again, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but simply that we don't have the moral right to forcibly stop them. So to do so is violating someone's wishes. It's impinging on their personal autonomy and freedom, just like chattel slavery would impinge on someone's autonomy and freedom. And there was individuals, who would make the argument that, 250 years ago, that people subject to chattel slavery, people who were, humans who were enslaved, people would say, oh, and it's very racist, we would say this is very offensive now, that, they're being civilized, they're benefiting from the slavery, it's mutually beneficial. And now, people who, work on psychiatric wards make a very similar case. It's mutually beneficial. Psychiatrists and psychiatric nurses and social workers are able to earn money from violating the explicit wishes of individuals who'd say, I want to leave, I don't want to be here. And again, people would say, oh, it's mutually beneficial. By forcing treatment, we're benefiting these people. In death, well, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but anyway, I'll probably end this pretty soon. But I just want to raise the point that, there are similarities between what goes on currently as far as locking adults up in psychiatric wards who don't want to be there against their explicit, expressed desires, and, historical chattel slavery. And I hope more individuals examine that and, hopefully come to the conclusion that it's not right to forcibly lock adults who've not broken laws in places that they don't want to be, because that's what's happening. People say, I don't want to be here inside a hospital, and in some states social workers have to sign off, and I think most states it's the doctor, but then the social worker or doctor can override that individual's expressed desire for freedom and autonomy and can force them to stay in a psychiatric ward. So I think that's wrong, and that's the implications of this. So I hope you read the books that psychiatrist Thomas Szasz wrote and that I mentioned earlier, referenced earlier, and I hope you think critically about this, and hopefully we can all live in a more just and fair society in the future. So I guess I'll end it there. And then also, lastly, I'll say again, just to reiterate, because I think this is really important, I hope that suicides stop happening. I just don't think force and coercion are going to ever truly, authentically help that to happen over the long run, as far as if we ever really want to truly see, zero suicides on Earth. I think we need to rely on persuasion and kindness and not coercion and force. So, yeah, I'll end it there. Anyway, again, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, watch my other videos, visit my websites, and have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, or night, wherever and wherever you may be.